Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And we are at episode 70. We're at 70. I get so excited with these round numbers.
And it's a good number.
Yes, it is. And today we're going to be talking about uncertainty. This is called the Uncertainty Show.
What? I'm not sure what you mean. Sorry, it's just a dad joke thing.
You can't help yourself. I just give you some space to get out of the way in the beginning of the episode. So the reason we thought about this is last week I was in Baltimore, Washington. Baltimore outside of Washington, D.C. And this was before the government shutdown had ended. Right. So by the time this airs, the government shutdown will have been behind us. But it was very much in the news as I was in Baltimore, and I was there for a little over a week, and I was talking to different people. And what kept coming up was this really intense uncertainty about their job, their employment, and their financial stability. So one person I was talking to works for the federal government at a fairly senior level, had been furloughed, and was not sure that they were going to get back pay for the, over a month that they'd been out. There was a lack of clarity. And this is a breadwinner. It was significant. It's not, most of us will feel it if we don't get a paycheck for a month or more. The second person works for a company that contracts heavily with the federal government, who did round after round of layoffs, and then did just randomly demoted a bunch of people, including this person.
Okay.
So it's like, you're going to do more work with less people. Oh, and by the way, we're cutting your salary by, I think it was like 30%. It was not small. Yeah. And the theme that kept coming up for people is, what do we do in a period of such intense uncertainty at work, right? And this is, of course, right outside of Washington, D.C., so people were very much focused on what was happening with the federal government and the shutdown. But, now that I'm back home in Seattle, there's constant layoffs from, Amazon did a huge group of layoffs. Other places are doing layoffs. And there's just a lot of uncertainty in general. I mean, what is the impact of tariffs? How does that play out? What is the impact of AI? And what is that going to look like? And even in some industries with, people who have brown skin being grabbed off the streets. Yeah. That is also there's just so much uncertainty in so many different arenas. So that's what we wanted to talk about today is, how do you deal with that level of uncertainty?
Yeah, I remember when I bought my first house, I was 27. I believe I was 27. And the woman at the escrow company called me one night and said, "Hey, could you come into the office?" This was after it was a non-standard call. And I happened to be downtown Palo Alto, and I stopped in. I said, "Oh yeah, I'm heading off to the gym. I'll stop in." And so I stopped in, and he's talking about, nothing really. And I was kind of silently waiting for the point to be made. And I think she may have leaned across the desk and put her hand on top of my hand and said, "Listen, I'm super happy that you're buying this house, but let me tell you, going forward," and she proceeded to give me instructions on living. She said, "You could be between jobs, you could lose your job, you could get sick, any of these number of things, but you must do one thing, and one thing always, got to pay that mortgage. You got to do it. You can't lose this house." Now, in the scheme of things, the house was not very expensive. The likelihood that I would lose a $120,000 house, which meant something in 1986 or 87, was very low, but I was impressed with her earnestness, and it absolutely set me down I want to say panic fueled, but I think the word has a negative connotation, but I was laser directed to never let that happen, because she spoke the voice of experience, that she had seen it happen. Enterprising young man buying his first house, pre-marriage, doing well, he's going to buy it. And then something happens, screws up. And so I've kind of applied that to every single aspect of my life. And people are like, "Why were you working 3 jobs in a row? 3 jobs at a time?" Like when I was at Apple, and then Code, and then this place, Skin Crawler. I go, I just, somebody explained to me very specifically that there are lines that you cannot cross. So you need to secure certainty for yourself insofar as pick something that's the most important thing for you to get taken care of, and you got to take care of it. She didn't tell me to go out and rob a bank or steal cars or deal drugs. She didn't do any of that. But she really, I don't want to use the word scared, but she really impressed upon me that in that aisle, in the sea of an uncertainty, that you must find one thing that you know is absolutely certain and bank on that. And I think that's framed my approach ever since 1987, at the very least.
Well, and I think this is where we can call out, like, the circumstances are so different. And this is where I think I want to name a real generational difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were able to buy a house at 27. I was able to buy a house right outside of Seattle as a, single mom in her 30s. Neither one of us comes from like generational wealth. There were not trust funds involved. And that would not be able to happen now. Right. Yeah. So the house that I live in now, it's the same house I bought 25 years ago. I would never have been able to afford it. Right. Like in King County, which is where Seattle is, I think the average median household, like, house cost is over $500,000. Mm-hmm. Right. So a single mom in her 30s would not have been able to afford a house that was $500,000 or more. I mean, I routinely talk with people who, have substantial mortgages. So I want to honor the fact that for people who are afraid about losing their job in a situation where their mortgage is, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 just for like a regular home, and they have student loan debts, and they have childcare, which costs in this country, particularly in, again, where I live, as much as like a private university. Yep. They're very real. More. Yeah. More. In many cases. Yeah. And so there are very real financial restrictions, right? So
I remember prior to that, I've been also affected by the Asian investment circle. I had seen something on the news about these Asian investment circles. And so I had tried to collectively interest some friends of mine in, we should buy a house. Four of us together, we should do this. And that was almost harder than doing it by myself. It's just, people are risk averse, and I'm 27. What do I need a house for? And I was like, but these are the same people who, once I did buy the house, ended up later being roommates and helping me pay the mortgage anyway. So, but it would have been nice to get a larger house in a better neighborhood with four people. But I was looking for anything to establish a foothold, up to doing something which I really didn't like doing, living with other human beings. So,
and this is, I think, part of the reason that the uncertainty is so strong right now, right? Is there's a new, I always pay attention to the buzzwords and catchphrases that show up in PR announcements, but the latest one is job hugging. And it's basically means holding on to a job, even if you don't like it, even if it's not, you don't see a career path for yourself, just to have a job. Right. Yeah. And it is described in various news outlets with some disdain, like it's going to be damaging to your career. But again, I have hugged the heck out of many jobs because
I was 10 years at Ozzy.
Right.
So, yeah.
Quintessential job hugging. And again, I want to validate for people that are doing that you have real reasons to do that. And like we always talk about, right? There's a difference. Like, we cannot blame ourselves individually for systemic problems, right? Like if we lived in a country like where you live in Spain, where there was affordable healthcare, then it would be very different. I mean, with the government going back and the, current restrictions, the Republicans are going to cut the subsidies. The subsidies are going to expire for health insurance that's bought through the exchanges, the ACA. And, for some people, their health insurance is going to go up 100% or more. which for people who are on a fixed income or self-employed like I am, it's really significant. So many people, including myself, have stayed at jobs that were not ideal and hugged them because that's where I got my health insurance, and I got it at a rate that was affordable, and I got decent healthcare coverage, which is really hard to do otherwise. So I don't want anybody that's listening to this that wants some kind of cues or ideas about how to deal with intense uncertainty to make this a personal failing. Because if we lived in a country like most developed countries that had a single payer system, your secondary and advanced education was paid for to some degree, and childcare was subsidized heavily, if not free, which happens in most of the developed world, we would have a lot less insecurity. So your fear of financial insecurity is pretty significant, especially if you have children or anybody in your family is sick. So I'm validating the hell out of your concern.
And that is indeed why I moved. Somebody asked me why. They thought it had to do with Trump, singularly. And I was like, I can't afford to get old in America. That's it. Very simple. So,
Right. Which is a travesty. So, but let's talk specifically. If you are in this vortex of uncertainty, what can you do individually? Right. So again, I've already said this is not your problem alone to fix. We don't want to beat ourselves up, but I think there are some things that we can do to mitigate the psychic pressure of being in that kind of an intense uncertainty. Right. So the first thing is I want you to think about managing your own emotions appropriately and regulating yourself. Right. Yeah. So this is something I wrote about this in my Substack last week. I see this a lot as an executive coach with individuals coming into the workplace and bringing their past experience, their fear, their trauma, their whatever, right, which is going to happen, but not in any way considering, so is it my boss's job or my coworker's job to soothe me when I have an extreme reaction to constructive criticism? Or is that something I should be dealing with in therapy or with a trusted friend?
Yeah. We've talked about this before, but that usually seems to go hand in hand with the workplaces. They go, we're like a family here.
Right.
I really don't like hearing that. Most families are dysfunctional. So that's what you're telling me, right? Okay, sorry.
And this happens in families too. I mean, I think that there is a tendency for people who, for whatever reason, don't want to live a very examined life. Instead of saying, I feel uncomfortable because of this thing that another person is doing, which is in and of itself innocuous, but it is somehow activating some old thing for me. Yeah. And it is 100% their fault, right? Yeah. So instead of saying, okay, so my boss in the context of an annual review gave me positive feedback and also some constructive areas where I could improve. And I am going to, if activated by some perfectionism, some shame spiral from my youth, what have you, I'm going to go into some, Vesuvius of rage at the fact that like not everything was positive and expect my boss to fix that because it's his fault that he gave me, you know what I mean? That's what I mean about self-regulation at work.
I think in this day and age, bosses have a not so unique way of fixing it.
Which is, you're out. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things too, that I advise people who are in a situation of uncertainty at work is to get really canny and savvy about keeping your job. Right. And so one of the ways to keep your job is to be very intentional about how you regulate your emotions.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine that every email and every conversation that you have is visible to everyone in the organization, because certainly your emails are actually, and be very intentional. Like, don't gossip. Don't talk trash about whatever it is that's happening. I mean, people understandably want to gather together around the actual or proverbial water cooler and talk about, are there going to be layoffs? Are there going to be whatever? I understand that's going to happen, but you don't need to be fomenting those conversations.
No, and in actual fact, your boss does not want you to participate in these. They're super concerned about morale. And this is not, I worked with two people who had for whatever reason, constitutionally unable to like each other. Their job tasks didn't really have them intersecting any more than 5% of the time, but they got into some huge dramatic argument with each other, and that it rose to the level of a manager having to talk to them. And again, this was 1997, 98, and the way they dealt with it then was exactly the way they deal with it now. They fired them both. It was like, there was something happening here, and we don't know what it's about, but it's not about the bottom line, so you got to go. And that was the name of that tune.
Right.
So,
and again, it's, nobody that's ever listened to this podcast for any extended period of time or read either one of our things on Substack is going to think that we're fans of corporate America or telling people to comply. That's not what this is about. This is about really focusing on keeping your job by making sure that, because when we are stressed, we regress and we go back to patterns of behavior that are often unskillful, and projecting out our discomfort, our fear, our worry onto other people around us and expecting them to manage those emotions in some way is something that a lot of us do when we are stressed. And I'm sure you can think of it in your family, in your community, and at work. And to really be intentional about, is this problem that I'm putting on somebody else actually theirs to solve, right? Like most supervisors do not have a lot of input on who gets laid off and who doesn't.
Correct.
Right. So the person that works just above you, in most cases, unless you're very, very senior, is also worried about her job. And she probably has absolutely zero say in whether or not you keep your job. Right. Yeah. So I think making sure, often we can't immediately turn around our exterior deliverables, right? Like someone who is in, has some sort of a deliverable of sales or units of production may not be able to make that go up by 50 or 60%, but they can do the job they have, and you can be 50 or 60% better about regulating your emotions and trying to at least be neutral. Don't make where you work worse.
Right. Correct.
So that's the first one. And then I think the next one is be careful about money. Right? So we all carry lots of baggage about money and our ideas about money. And it's understandable whatever our reactions are when we're insecure. But some people, when they are afraid, stop spending money. And some people, when they are afraid, spend money. Yeah. If you are a spend money person, just be intentional about it and be careful. Don't, and it's not just like retail therapy, right? I mean, if, buying $100 worth of crap online is going to make you feel better, fantastic, right? Going and getting like two full sleeves of tattoos, which is going to be a significant investment, may or may not be where you want to spend your money, right? Yeah. And I think one of the things, I mean, I noticed this. So my book came out in May, and I had a lot of people say to me, we can pay you money to get your book publicized or sold or whatever. Like there were lots and lots of people.
We can pay you money, or you can pay us?
Sorry. Yeah. You pay us money and we will work magical results, whether it's press, PR or podcasts or whatever. Right. And I think of myself as a pretty savvy person, and I've had a lot of people try to sell me stuff, and I was very assiduous about how I invested. And there's a bunch of money that I could have just put in the middle of my yard and lit on fire for all the value it gave to me. And I think that people who are afraid of losing their jobs are in probably a similar position that I was with publishing, my first traditionally published book, which is I want to get this right and I want to pay an expert, and be careful with that, right? Because there are a lot of people who get conned.
Yeah, friends of mine and other creative endeavors have often been, and I remember something, weirdly enough, for music fans, that Greg Ginn from SST Records told me, and he said, when you're in the position of doing a new record or he said, the people that approach you are generally not the people you want at all to do it. He's like, you find somebody that you understand to be the best, and you approach them. And I found that to be much more useful than, and the costs were amazingly different. And same with acting or any other kind of creative endeavor. I mean, some person out there, actually, a boyfriend of my oldest daughter's was pretty kid, wanted to get into modeling. They wanted to charge him $4,000 for a headshot. And I was like, listen, I got Leonard Part 6 on a headshot that cost me $25. This is $4,000 is crazy, but it's on you, buyer beware, right? So you have to be careful once you have a need to be careful in regards to your finances, I think.
Right. And realize that just like there are people who are preying on new authors who don't know what they're doing, like me, there are people who are preying on folks who are either recently laid off or at risk of being laid off. And, they, even if it's something small, like subscribe to my Substack. I mean, I have a Substack. People can subscribe to it, but they can also get it for free, right?
I'll give you a tangent that you should. I'm sorry, it's just a crazy one. So HarperCollins puts out my fight book in 2007, and my mom starts talking about, I really want to get that in a T-shirt. What are we talking? T-shirt? What are you talking about? So there's a T-shirt that you guys are putting out. I go, as far as I know, HarperCollins is not putting out any T-shirt. She goes, yeah, the I Heart Eugene Robinson shirt. They, through Amazon's wonderful upselling world, sold some franchise to a T-shirt maker to sell I Heart Eugene Robinson. And I was quick on the stick. I contacted them and said, I'm going to sue you for everything that you're worth. They go, okay, we can do this. I go, you can't. And I had a lawyer send them a letter, a cease and desist letter. And they said, okay. And I pursued damages. He said, well, we're not going to pay, but what could you? I said, all right, I'll tell you what. You give me 10 shirts. So they gave me 10 shirts, but it was like completely unexpected that there were these remoras, these lamprey eels just latching on to make money off of in your wake. I did not like that at all. Sorry. Sorry for the tangent.
But that's a good tangent because it's even worse now because those remoras are sucking all of our words through AI, large language models, whatever you want to call them. And they're doing it with impunity. Like it doesn't matter how many times I go into the settings on whatever and say, I don't want AI, I don't want Copilot, I don't, no. You and I both know that every word we put on a Substack, every word that we have in this podcast is being sucked up somewhere and repurposed, right? Like I absolutely guarantee if somebody goes into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your flavor is and asks for advice about something we've given advice on, it's going to spit out something that one or both of us said with zero credit and zero acknowledgement. So that's even, but yes, tangent. So the other thing that I would advise you to do if you are in this kind of uncertainty is a little bit more esoteric, and it's really use this as an opportunity to look at how big your life is and maybe build a bigger life, right? And we've talked about this before. And again, being mindful that we are older, of a generation in a different space. But there were a lot of times where I thought my identity was my job. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you, you are not your job. You are not your career. Yeah. Right. And I'm not talking about being an artist. Like I do feel like being a writer and an artist is an essential part of my identity. But selling advertising or running an ad agency or whatever, even though I had enjoyment in those things, that's not my identity. And if you are afraid about losing your job, if you have lost your job, if you have been demoted, what I suggest is to recognize two things. One is we do assign a lot of emotional identity weight towards the work that we do in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if all your eggs are in that basket and that basket is at risk, it would behoove you to look at what else am I? What else do I do? What else brings me joy, right?
Yeah. I've been very careful about not ever doing that. And part of the trickery that I employed was to always worst case scenario it. And that helped me quite a bit. I mean, I was happier when I was 16, 17, working in a fast health food restaurant as a cashier than I was ever at Adobe, which probably paid me 300% more. But if push came to shove, I could through a pastiche of low paying jobs could make a job that would keep me relatively happy. So some people talk about it in terms of the absence of pride. I just rewatched last night Trading Places. If you remember the Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd movie, where they take a street guy and and it had an interesting message in regards to money. But I've never derived any sort of personal. I liked Code magazine, but it was never who it is that I was. And that's the benefit of being an artist the whole time, because that's who I am. I was just an artist who happened to be an editor, right? Versus an editor with nothing else going on. So
I guess for me, I do feel like I have more of a propensity to get sucked into my careers, my identity, or this particular job, because I also, for me, there was a certain aspect of like, fuck you to, all the people, mostly men, who had sexually harassed me, all the, it's like, oh, where are you now? Oh, look, I have this job with this title and this amount of money. And so there was a like revenge thing that was tied into it, but it's still
incredibly satisfying and should always be pursued.
But the problem is that, I became aware of it as I got older and was able to step away from it. I don't have those jobs anymore, and I haven't for quite some time. But I think it's recognizing for each individual to sit with what is important to me, because what happens for all of us, and I include myself in this, when I am in a lot of uncertainty and very stressed out, I often am not as considerate of the people that I live with as I am when I'm less stressed out. Right. And I think being in intense uncertainty is a time for us all, while we're regulating our emotions, to look at how kind am I being to my spouse, my partner, my children. Right. And we all have a tendency to try to numb out when we're, like stressed. And I just would invite all of us that have young children in our lives to make sure that, when our kid is in the room with us, our phone is in another room, another place. Right. Like scrolling through LinkedIn while your kid is near you is understandable, but just maybe think about it. Because the reality is, if the job goes away, hopefully, if you're lucky, you still have the spouse, the partner, the pets, the children. And that's where I think if we recognize that, then we're in a better place.
Well, I'm like Diogenes in regards to LinkedIn, still looking for one person who's ever gotten a job through LinkedIn. Anybody, I will accept anecdotal evidence. I have never met a single person who's ever secured any kind of employment via LinkedIn. I've heard people who've got dates through LinkedIn, but not a job.
But I also think too that the idea is anything you can do to expand your understanding of where your self-worth sits is useful, right? And it might not be friends and family for you, right? It might be your art. It might be a pastime you love, right? When was the last time you did a thing you love, whether it's hiking or water painting or going to an art house movie and watching a foreign film? The idea is to recognize, like, as human beings, there is more to us than the job that we go to. And that losing the job is, of course, scary and difficult. And I'm not in any way diminishing the impact of that, but we'll get through it. And, speaking as somebody who is older, there are jobs that were so important to me at the time that I literally can't remember. Sometimes I have to go back through LinkedIn and be like, where was I working when my kids were in middle school? Where was I? Because what seemed so important at the time now is just like one in a long string of, paycheck opportunities and kind of different. So hopefully that's helpful. Is there anything that I missed about dealing with the uncertainty?
I had a weird dream this week, and my dreams don't usually include famous or semi-famous people, but in making an appearance in this dream was Sonny Barger, and I don't know if that name is familiar to you, but he is an American from Oakland, I believe, who went off to World War II and came back and was so changed by the war that he decided that he wanted to do something that was very akin to what he had done in the war, but he was not going to get an office job. He wasn't going to use a GI Bill to start he's a guy who started the Hells Angels. And if you look at, and I was like, wow, he appeared in the dream, was giving me all this knowledge and this wisdom. I go, is he still alive? And then he died. He had throat cancer, and he died at I think 2022 something. And I was like, look, they're bad guys, but the organizational skill that he developed from the military. I mean, he just, we call it the war back home. He just took what he had done and just continued to do it. I don't think it could be said that he spent a moment of misery doing what he had done, though I don't think it contributed to the betterment of society, but it was just an interesting zig where others zagged. And I still haven't been able to make sense of why he was appearing in my dream. But
I think that's also, but you bring up a really good point, because the other insulation against this type of, the emotional impact of this type of intense uncertainty is community, right?
Yes.
And Hells Angels, biker gangs are a kind of community. And
Totally.
People I've known who are in them feel very connected to the people that they ride with. And
Yep.
So look around in your life and re-engage communities that you maybe have lost touch with, or start some kind of community. Go and participate with other people, ideally in person, doing something that you enjoy, whether it's for the world, whether it's a protest, or, volunteering in an animal shelter, or doing, wild swimming. But try to figure out ways to be with other people, because that will also help you. Okay.
Much more than LinkedIn.
Much more than LinkedIn. Yeah. Hells Angels, better than LinkedIn. All right. Well, if you have an idea for a show, if you have a question you want us to give you advice about, WTF@badbossbrief.com. I promise I read every single one and will respond unless you're selling us something. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your host, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting speirolo.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's the number 3, on Insta. Reach out with your questions, concerns, worst case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. Stephanie will personally answer every single submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for new episodes of Bad Boss Brief, so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.